So we left off on the question of what is alive. So I still maintain the position that everything's alive.
So like, how are we gonna define life in terms of like, okay, we got like literal atoms and like particles and shit, like tiny ass shits out there. Like, at what combination is something become alive? Like, is a nutria like those little space things that are smaller than electrons that like aren't even like fully solid matter? They're like it's like some box shit where it's here and it's not here at the same time. Like, there's millions of them passing through my body and through the entire planet, like unblocked by anything right now. Like
Right.
those aren't really alive. They're like smaller than electrons. It's a particle.
Yeah,
Like
but
just
my
but the
I,
particle
I believe
has
that they are
direction.
alive.
How is that alive? Like it's not. It doesn't really reproduce. It can split, but when they split, they kind of blow up. So it's not really a reproduction. It's like a half life thing.
Right, but I
They
don't
like
hold the earlier stated criteria of like how it needs to
right,
reproduce and stuff. Like I don't even hold to that. I think what could be useful here is if I
huh?
flip it and if I say that I believe nothing is alive. And as you try to argue against that position that I'm going to pretend to hold, you're going to find that it has to be all or nothing.
You know what's really weird? Nothing being alive sounds more plausible than everything being alive.
Right, but then you're alive.
Am I?
Okay, well, I suppose I can't totally verify that, but I know I'm alive.
I just wanted to hit you with the Owenism real quick. That's all. I was just being annoying.
Yeah, I mean if you we could go that way with the I don't know if you've heard of David Hume with like hard
So it's like,
skepticism,
okay,
but
so if we get past the initial thing of like, I'm me and you're you, but we can't tell that each other is,
right.
Okay, if we move past that, we'll just set that aside for like a small moment.
Okay.
Okay, so we'll move past that, like, to the assumption, I guess, that we're alive, or like that part of understanding aliveness doesn't matter, right? So, but like, and it's back. I feel like then it's back to like, how do I define what makes something alive? Because it's like if everything isn't alive, that almost makes more sense. Like it's all just not alive. It's like we're almost all just mechanical parts.
Right, exactly. You're not alive, you're just matter in motion. You're just a bunch of electrons and fucking particles and stuff.
I mean, yeah, I don't know how alive we are. I think our like version of what's alive is like we categorize our experience, like how we categorize our response to stimuli that we like receive.
But then if you said that to me, that I'm just matter in motion, I know that that's false. The fact that I'm alive is self-evident because I'm having this conversation and I'm having this experience.
But it's just motion. It's just the motion of the electrons in your brain and your
Right, but
mouth.
I'm experiencing it. It's like it has to do with the hard problem of consciousness.
So does you experiencing it like? But that's kind of what I was saying. Is like the only thing that makes something as live is how we organize the experience of it. Like we're just saying that our ability to recall or retain an experience is that what gives us life. Then
Yeah, I would say that they're like synonymous. If the lights are on and you're like, having an experience and participating in reality in that kind of way, then that's what it means to be living.
how does a rock do that? I know this is the one I used last time, so
I
I'm just
think
going back.
the same way that we do.
They can't like what's the word I'm looking for? Like the way that we're
Like they don't have the
on
same
picking
range of
using
experience, but I think that they're still, partaking in a point of view.
like do they like are they participating in experience or do they have an experience, right? Because to have an experience you'd have to be able to like I was kind of saying, like perceive the experience. Like a rock can't really perceive anything.
I think it does have an experience.
How does it recall or retain that experience? Like, okay, it can go through the experience of a bigger rock smashing it into two smaller rocks, but there's nothing to retain that like experience other than like
Yeah,
the
they
fact.
probably don't have memory. But then you have
So
hard
memory,
drives,
so
which
having a
is
memory is not necessarily like kind of what you're saying, because memory is not like a requirement of them something to be alive.
yeah.
Okay, like what's alive that doesn't have a memory? 'Cause it's like I don't mean memory in the sense of like I mean memory in the sense of memories, but also memories in the sense of like genetic memory, like where things are born with like you already know what can kill you and what you can eat. Not everything, but like a good bit, you know? sea turtles come out them shells and they know to go to the water, right?
Right, I see what you're saying. Because I was about to
Like that,
argue that like even bacteria don't have memory, but if you're talking about genetic memory, then even bacteria would have that.
right? And so it's like, okay, but like then there's a lot of things that like I guess the rock is the easiest since I used it last time and already today.
Yeah.
Like the rock doesn't have that either.
So I
So like
guess
where is kind of our point of like
I
life?
think memory loss occurs when you get into just like raw chemistry. Maybe biology is just the invention of memory.
Oh my god, that's exactly what it is, because it's really just like biology is just molecules remembering how to make themselves like that again. And respond to shit the same way they did before.
Right.
That's all it is. So it quite literally biology quite literally is when matter started figuring out how to repeat itself. Okay, so biology is like basically matter making memory.
Hmm.
Okay, but then is biology like the definition of what's alive?
Well, yeah, technically the etymology of biology is that it's the study of what's living. But I was just using it
Oh yeah,
whatever to distinguish between
understood.
the pure chemistry and then
Right.
what we at least can both agree on is living. But I would argue everything is biological, and you can see this in how like riverbeds form the same patterns as veins, and how I don't know if you've ever seen the image of like basically the cosmos at like the most zoomed out scale of all the galaxy. I forget what they were called. This image that I just put in the chat, and there's a few that are like that.
Okay, so like we zoom out and like this is what the light shows us. This is what happens when we connect the planets. Like what the fuck's happening here?
The purple looking one is galactic structures. Like each dot is like a galaxy. It's kind of like a dark map of dark matter.
All right, so like my first thing with the images is like, we kind of drew onto it. Like we zoomed out of a zoomed out picture of things, put a bunch of yellow dots on it, and then traced them with like streaks of like cool neon light. So it's like we made it look like that. You know what I mean?
No, that's how it looks like.
Like if you just zoomed out and took a picture, it just looks like that.
Yeah, that's like the
Like, that's just how the light looks.
superstructure. That's just how like galaxies interact with each other in the structures that they form at the highest scale.
Does it actually like light up that way? Like is it visible that way?
No, it doesn't light up that way. It's kind of like how
It's
the
just
Hubble telescope will see things in the infrared and the UV and make things pop more than they would to the naked eye.
yeah, that is pretty interesting. I don't know what I make of that entirely.
Yeah, it's not like
Also,
the whole
my original
argument hinges
question.
on that, but it's just to me that kind of is a clue to how everything is biological in nature and how all the same patterns that we think are unique to biology, like fractals and spirals and all of that can be found in things that we consider unalive, like lightning and riverbeds and whirlpools and
Yeah,
bubbles.
it does repeat like a comical amount of times.
Yeah, like it's all the same pattern that everything is participating in.
Just wonder how, like, if it really expands that far. Like, I wonder how much it is like that, and how much like we're applying what we know onto it, like, because we don't know.
I just don't
The
see
space is
how
so
or why it would be
big.
otherwise.
I don't know. I'm gonna put a pin in this for a second when my brain like figures out what I want to do with it, and go back to like the first thing you said, like with these two things, which was like the riverbeds also like follow the structure of veins. Like, what do you mean by that exactly? Like, just like how they go like this and they look like a
Yeah,
vein.
pretty much how it's a fractal pattern that kind of weaves in and out and branches.
But not all rivers are fractal patterns. They're not
Pretty
completely like
much
that. All
all rivers are fractal patterns.
I have to look this up now.
If you look up like watershed, I don't know if you know what watersheds are, and like river
This is
deltas, and then it's not just rivers and veins, it's also roots and highways and slime molds, lightning, cracks in concrete, cracks in glass.
it's like all the branches of any water course at any stage of its course are equal if the rapidity is equal. Like if like everything is the same, which tends to happen in a lot of cases because things are so connected that like if like you jumped 250 like kiloliters of water in one area, like it would have the effect all the way down the river. But like basically, okay, wait, that bothers me even more. Huh. Okay, this is gonna sound weird to say, but like, because naturally isn't the right word. I guess unopposed. Like if you let a river grow unopposed, then it's always a fractal. But if we fuck with it or like trees fall in it and a bunch of shit, it can fuck up. But if we don't do anything to it and nothing fucks with it, it's infinitely always a fractal. That's fucking crazy. Shout out fractalfoundation.org. Damn, that kind of blows my mind. But also, like, in the. It does make sense, though. The water goes from, like, I guess not top to bottom, but, like, top to bottom. They, like, wherever it kind of is to wherever it goes into the ocean and back. And if it does the same thing the whole way down, then the whole thing's going to be the same, basically ish. Damn.
So my point with the nothing being alive thing is like we
Is
say
that
particles aren't
pattern?
alive, and then we can say chemistry is not living because chemistry is just, how particles interact with each other. And then but then at that point it's like biology isn't living because they're just chemicals interacting, which is just particles interacting. And then at that point you're a biological thing, so you're not living. And yet it should be self-evident that you have a point of view, and so that's self-evidently false. But then if you're alive and you're just a bunch of matter in motion, and everything is just matter in motion, then I don't see why we shouldn't assume that everything is alive, therefore.
I mean, if you go back a few steps, like to after when we start combining the particles and shit into like people, I think that's your first point of like, okay, things can change there. Like, the logic could switch roots at that point because someone can make a distinction between what came before that and what came after that.
Right, but fundamentally what comes
Also,
after is built upon what came before, and so it's all fundamentally just matter in motion.
it is, but there are like there's large changes to the matter in motion, like big pendulum shifts, and like how the those things are going to interact with each other, and those have to be marked by something.
There's like distinctions between the levels, but at the end of the day, like at that point you're
But
just
why
promoting a
isn't one of the
spectrum.
distinctions life? Why isn't life like what we would consider alive one of those distinctions?
Why are we drawing a hard line at one of those levels when there's like a bunch of levels to it? And then my
I
other
think it
line of
makes,
reasoning
but
is
I think it
like,
makes a lot. Like I think the difference though between like the stage before and the stage after is so large that it's easy to make a distinction there between like things that respond to the normal factors that people in science would consider like to be a biotic factor, and also the things that like are a little different than that in terms of like what we discussed versus when things start like repeating patterns and maintaining memories and stuff. Like if you want to include that, like that's a big jump from like rock.
right, but it's still just
So
the
it's like I feel
same
like it's
stuff.
easier to draw a hard line because that jump
Yeah,
is massive. Like the complicated level of
right.
I guess like chemistry and like universe shit involved in that jump is such a big jump. It's like that's why like there's a line there.
But as complex as the jump is, or as big as the jump is into complexity, no matter how complex something gets, it's still fundamentally the same stuff as the rock. It's just particles that are
Some of the
interacting.
same stuff as the rock, but yeah.
And then we get to the DNA point, which is just like DNA is pretty almost like simple chemistry. And same thing with single cellular organisms. Like it's pretty straightforward chemistry. Like it's all just chemistry at the end of the day. Like if you pick apart every part, you can deconstruct everything
Put it back
that is
together
biological
ish.
to chemistry, which you can just deconstruct into atomic shit particles.
I don't disagree that fundamentally everything's made of the same thing, but I just don't think that means it's all alive. Because I
So
think
then,
like
if you want to
Like the
argue that,
combination of things is what makes it alive. Like it is the specific combination of things that I think makes the distinction.
well, okay, so it's
Even with
sounding to
like a
me like you're
river,
trying to
like the
argue
river,
that complexity is the marker of biology or of what's living. But then,
certain level of
so,
complexity. Yeah,
okay, so then, and that's where I feel like it's like we get into arbitrary territory because it's like, what is that certain level? Like, what defines it?
I don't know. I think we got a little bit onto something with like being able to like retain the experience of the things that happen, and also like being able to reproduce or be able to interact with the environment, or at the very least have a response to the environment interacting with you. I think you can start listing the big factors that were the biggest change from like rock to like movie crawly thing. Like if you like you can start defining it by like what are those major differences between those things. Like I think that's like the starting
Well,
point for that.
but a computer isn't alive, and a computer is vastly more complex than a rock, and like you could almost just consider it, but by your logic, like silicon-based life, because and it can retain memory and it has thought processing and all this other stuff.
Much like is a computer experiencing? Like I know it responds to the shit that we do to it, and it stores the information that goes into it. But we made it do that. It doesn't do that naturally. It's not a naturally occurring thing.
Okay, so then rocks are living because rocks are naturally occurring.
No, I just think like in addition to the other factors, this makes a difference.
You see, doesn't that sound arbitrary? Like we're like every
Not
time
really,
something doesn't fit in the
because
model,
it's like
you just
nah,
keep
because we
expanding.
like we didn't make the rock though. We
Right, the
made the
rock is a
computer out
natural
of the
occurring
rock.
thing, unlike a computer, so it's living. Oh, but it also needs to be the
Not
complex
really.
thing. Like it sounds more like you have like a presupposition on what's supposed to be living, and then you're like forcing everything to try to like fit in that model.
I think the major difference there is like a rock came into existence not from me doing something. Like I had to make that computer out of stuff and then make it do a lot of the things, but not all of the things that make something alive. Like a computer's not going to reproduce another computer on its own, like without you telling it, like, hey, I need you to move this other machine arm to put these pieces of the puzzle together to make another computer. Like, it's not just going to make another computer. It's not just going to respond to something you didn't tell it to respond to.
I
Like
mean, at
even
a certain
AI, like you
point,
have
you could
trained
build
it
a
to
robot
respond.
that could make robots,
Right,
and
but
then it
it's
could
not. But you still
reproduce in
had to
that
tell it.
sense.
Right, but you have to like you're programming it to do that, and it's not like a natural form of reproduction from itself. It's like collecting other stuff to make it new stuff.
Well, I feel
It's
like
like just
you're
doing our
programmed
job
by your
for us.
genetic memory, and then that's why you're reproducing. And so it's like I don't see the difference. It's just one is artificially programmed and one is naturally
But we
programmed.
can still take actions or make choices outside of that. It's like, yeah, you are genetically like the only things you're scared of off rip when you're born, like you can't get rid of it, is like falling from a high height because like humans used to fall off cliffs and shit, and like pure darkness because we used to get eaten alive in the dark before fire. Like those are like the two fears that we already have preset when you're born. But
Right. So,
I can overcome those fears. Like a computer's not going to overcome whatever is already pre-programmed into it unless I make a change to that computer.
but even if you can overcome those fears, that would only be because like you would have the potential to do that in your biology in the first place. Like I'm just gonna keep arguing that nothing is
Yeah,
alive.
yeah.
Like you're just matter in motion. You're in all of your genetic memory and stuff, and everything that you are like, all the potential that you have is just, you know, a consequence of the determined reality that we live in, and the fact that everything is just matter in motion. It's all just particles moving according to the laws of physics, and no matter how they stack up and how complicated it gets, like that's all you are. And so there is no free will. There is no overcoming unless that
Is
was
that
already
all you
determined.
are, or just all you're like physically made of?
Well, so yeah, now we get into metaphysics, and if so, if we could argue that life is something beyond matter. I mean, I'll just roll with the idea, and I'll say that that's all you are, because there's no evidence, there's no way that you could demonstrate that there's anything beyond matter empirically.
Yeah, but I'm much more comfortable with the idea that everything is nothing or like nothing's alive, then everything's alive. If nothing's alive, that almost
Right,
like
so
kind of
then you're
makes
not alive.
kind of like, all right, maybe I'm not alive. Like,
Dude, we are reaching like autism levels that are unprecedented.
like I think that's like, I mean, it makes sense to my non-alive brain.
Dude, oh my, you're fucking alive, Jeremiah. And
I don't know if I'm alive, bro.
because
I'm just
you could
out
turn this
here.
on me and I know that I'm alive. It's the I am is a self-evident truth.
But that doesn't mean you're alive. It just means you exist.
I think that that's what it means to be alive though, because I it's more than just I am or that I exist. It's like I
But
have a
I'm
point of
saying
view.
nah. Like I'm
I have this
saying an
perspective.
electron is not alive. Like an electron's matter, it exists, but that shit's not alive. It's one electron.
Oh, but then I'm alive though.
Nah, you're dead, bro.
I'm
I mean, you're not
definitely
even, but you're
alive.
not
It's
dead. But you're
self-evident
not dead
from my
because to be dead, you
perspective
have to
because I
be
have a
alive.
perspective.
You're just existing.
No, false.
Nah, you're just existing.
Yeah, no, it's self-evident. Like we can go in
I don't think
circles
so.
about this, but I know that I am and that I partake in this reality.
Does I am mean I'm alive?
I think so, yeah. I don't see how being could be distinct from living.
Because of everything basically we just talked about.
Right, but I think everything we talked about is like a dead end or was rooted in arbitrary thinking. Like, so the other line of reasoning that I'm having here that I'm hung up on is like it has to do with Occam's razor and like I'm a being and I'm alive and then I'm made up of little shits and they're alive, the single cells, and then they're made up of little shits. And so why am I just going to arbitrarily draw a line here and say that those things aren't alive just because they're more basic? It's still the same stuff. And then you just do that all the way
How
down.
arbitrary really is the line? Like you can define the line with a lot of things and not make it as arbitrary as just the line itself. Once you start including like did I
Well,
just
we're
break this? But
drawing the line between chemistry and like single cellular organisms, basically, right?
yeah,
Right.
yeah.
And I don't see why, because a single cellular organism is literally just a complex chemical system.
But it's a complex chemical system that allows for a lot of processes to take place that no other chemical system can have take place.
No, but it is a chemical system. That's the thing.
Yeah,
S-
but it has an effect that's different than all the other effects.
But why call that the difference between the living and the dead?
Why call something an explosion? You know, because that's what we named it. Like that's what the title that we assigned to that difference.
Well, it's the title that you assigned. And I'm
It's the
calling that into
title that
question.
some scientists technically like put in there.
Right, but you agree with them.
But yeah, because that's the word we use in our language to describe the distinction between like that chemical reaction and this very different chemical reaction.
Yeah, and I'm challenging that. Like you possess being, right? You exist and you have a point of view and a perspective, correct?
Uh,
Like you
I
have
mean, yeah, I have a point
thoughts
of view and a
and
perspective.
feelings and you have an experience, right? Like we'll use the symbol of an eye. Like you have a perception and awareness.
I mean, yeah. Like, otherwise, we couldn't talk, basically.
Right. Exactly. And so you're made up of these small things, single cellular organisms, and they also possess awareness.
A single cellular organism has awareness.
Yeah, like they
Like,
also
yeah,
have
like a lesser of a degree of awareness than we do because we have more senses. But like, yeah, they have an awareness
right,
about
they
them.
have a more narrow range of experience, but they're
Right. Like
still
it still moves in a direction. If you touched it, it would know it got touched. Like it's still aware of shit.
and then those are made of chemicals and proteins. And then that's where you say draw the line here that those things do not have an experience, or that they have no awareness.
Yeah, they don't have an awareness or a way to store or like have any experience or pass on like or reproduce or
And
interact
then
like by
and
choice or respond by choice or
right.
even just involuntarily, like just any sort of like like when you hit your knee and your knee kicks out, like you
Yeah.
can't even do that.
And then
Just like is
here's
there.
what happens next. Then I say that those are arbitrary lines, and then I say, okay, let's say that those things are truly dead. And then if you run that up, the cells are dead because the cells are just like a system of the chemicals and proteins. You say that those things are dead or not alive because of such and such reasons. I say that's arbitrary. I say if those things are dead, then everything that is made out of that stuff is not alive because it's all the same stuff. No matter how complex it gets, it's still the same stuff, and so that applies to you. And then you're not alive, and then you start trolling, and then you say maybe I am not alive, and you pretend like you're not having a personal experience and that you're aware or possess awareness and being, and then we'll go in another circle.
But does me like having awareness and the ability to like act upon that awareness mean that I'm alive?
I think that
Because if it
if you
does, your
have
rock's
awareness,
cooked.
that's what it means to be living. Like if you possess a
Okay,
point
but
of
the
view
rock ain't
and the
got no
lights are on, so
awareness.
to speak, like that's consciousness, and that's what it means to be living.
So a rock is not alive. By extension,
I
neither
don't
is your river.
that does not logically follow from what I claimed.
It does.
Well, only if you presuppose that the rock in the river don't have awareness or that the lights aren't on and that they don't possess a point of view.
But they don't.
Well, you presuppose that, and then I call that into question based off of the.
Okay, so if we call that into question, like, what is the process by which it becomes not a question? Like, you're gonna ask the rock?
Well, that's just the thing, man. If we apply hard skepticism like that, I can't even verify that you're living. I like that thing that we put a pin in the beginning. Like if we unpin that, like at that point, I
I
could just
agree,
say
but
that
you
you're
can
not alive
draw.
and deny your personal experience and say that I live in a solipsistic reality where I'm the only actual being.
You could, but you can also draw a lot of other lines of similarity to help build a hypothesis that isn't that like using what you have around you. Like you can ask me and I can respond. You don't have to believe me, but then you can take what you know of me, like my genetic makeup, what kind of being I am, everything you know about that, and apply that to part of yourself. Since I'm not you, but I'm similar to you. Now it's a stretch that you cannot confirm, but now you have, a more educated guess or some supporting evidence that although can't be entirely proved that there's something there, but you can't even get that
No,
little
this is
bit out of
metaphysical. This goes beyond any sort of like empirical evidence. Consciousness is totally metaphysical. It's beyond empiricism. Like I cannot get in your head.
right. I agree, but you could like, and I'm not saying you can 100% confirm it's true, but you can make an inference that I might be due to the fact that I experience things not the same but similarly to you because we're both humans. We also grew up in like the same areas. Like there's a lot of things that you can pull from to be like, okay, I can't prove it, but like there's something that could be there.
Yeah, and I mean I'm willing to suspend my
I feel like
disbelief.
you can't do that like for other things. Like you can't draw those same connections. Like I feel like the line that like I'm not saying the line that like the collective scientific community accepts is the line, but like the line that they've put there, however much it bends a little bit, isn't entirely arbitrary. I mean, it's not entirely random. It's not like a random dude just went on a whim and decided that. Like I guess if you look at it from like an authoritarian like standpoint, where like we as the like ruling body of the planet almost like basically use our infinite authority as like the most not the most intelligent, but like the most communicative, intelligent, like impactful species here to like draw that line because we are the authority, like basically. Like if you I guess if you look at it that way in terms of like, and it's kind of arbitrary, but like not random. Like there's supporting evidence and collective like
Well, I wouldn't call it supporting
agreement that
evidence, but you're right that it's not arbitrary. Like I mean, you have shit that doesn't move that isn't like self-determining and apparently has no will and only reacts to like gravity and magnetic fields. And then you have something like a virus or a single cell or a dog or whatever, and it's a whole another world. Like
I
there's
think I'm
just
just comfortable with that distinction. I think part
I
of it's because like that's what I grew up on, and part of it like for me it follows a logical line of thought. Like that big level of step up difference to like becoming a single cell thing is such a large difference that like I don't know. Like to me, like that makes sense that it's a different fucking thing. Like it's built to the same shit, but it's some different shit.
no, but it's the same shit.
It's built out of matter, but like it's not the same matter and the same construction, the same pattern, same like shit that happens as the other matter. That's the
So
difference. It's the difference
so the
between how the
source of
matter
life
doing the
then, you're saying that the line is drawn in a certain pattern, in a certain configuration of matter.
yeah, or like any configuration of matter that's producing this one result, which is like anything that can fit in those within those factors of like what we consider like biotic or like life. And I guess with an extension of like those factors that are like kind of sciency, like I do like this idea of like when things can start retaining information. Like if we include that as like a sixth or a seventh idea in those factors, like yeah, I think that's like yeah.
So
Everything
you
alive to me like doesn't.
in the rock is just total darkness. The rock has no point of view, experience, nothing, no awareness of any kind.
Yeah,
So you
like
think it's
there's
just
nothing.
total silence, darkness, like there's nothing. There's no point of
So they
view.
have no perception or awareness of anything.
That's your position.
Yes, that is my position.
And so atoms, fucking like potassium and carbon and a bunch of this shit in test tubes, all of that, the lights are out.
Yeah, bro, it's just a thing in a test tube. It's a thing in a thing.
But
Test
then
tube doesn't know shit. The fucking
yeah,
potassium doesn't know shit.
and
The
then you
motherfucking
take those
holder for the
things
fucking
and you mix it
mash
around, you
them
put
up
it
with enough
together like
energy, you know.
Legos, and then
You whip it up with energy like goody.
it's something that's alive. So the source of consciousness is in the pattern of the being, in the manner in which the matter is arranged.
Yes. By extension of that, like, yeah, well, yeah, that's like yes, at level one, yes,
And
that's
that
the distinction.
does that not prompt a sort of spectrum of the living then, where then the only thing that we could consider absolutely dead is just like bare matter, like a neutrino with nothing else. But then as things stack up, they become more and more alive. And then when you hit that massive jump in complexity between what people normally call living and dead, between chemistry and biology, uh, that all that is a massive jump, but it's not like a switch, and it's still on a
I don't
spectrum.
think you get more and more alive. I think you just get closer to the point where you flip.
Okay, so
It's
it's
like
just
I
on
know
or
this is like a
off.
bad example. Yeah, like it's like if I trained for 15 years to become an NBA player, I'm not like getting closer to an NBA player unless I'm like actually in the NBA. It's like I'm not really like growing towards that now. Like, you know what I mean?
But isn't that what happens in the history of chemistry and biology? Like the atoms, the bare particles stack up into atoms, which stack up into chemicals, and they start and slowly things start to converge and emerge and become
Yeah,
more
shit starts
complex
smashing
until you
into each
get
other.
something like DNA, which retains genetic memory, and then what we call the living. Like is the structure of a crystal not closer to that of a living thing or what you would consider a living thing than it is to a bare neutrino? And if that's the case,
Say that.
wouldn't that imply that a crystal is more alive than a neutrino, but then less alive than you? And if it is just a switch, then I need like totally well defined exactly what that form is. Like at like what needs to be the precise configuration when the lights come on? Because I really think that to say that
Well,
the configuration
okay.
has to be something that reproduces itself, responds to its environment, uh, and da 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 da. I mean, that just sounds
Rose.
like someone's grocery list. Like, it doesn't sound like a hard metaphysical truth that
Or
distinguishes the
no,
living from the dead.
disagree with that a little bit. Like it might sound like somebody's grocery list a little bit, but
Like,
like
no, 100%.
that's what it takes. Like it's like this is such a big jump from here to here. There's literally five conditions that you have to meet in order to get to this threshold. Like you're becoming Super Saiyan, bro. Becoming Super Saiyan isn't just one little thing away,
No, but
bro.
it's
To
post
become
hoc
Super Saiyan,
reasoning.
huh?
That it's post hoc. Like, we
Hmm?
saw the things that we considered living, and then found the categories that overlap between them, and then retroactively applied that in our metaphysics.
Yeah, but like who had a choice in that? You know, it's like yeah, but like what were we gonna do? Be there at the beginning? Like
Well, we can practice philosophy and come to some sort of idea of what that underlying principle is that distinguishes the living from the dead.
I think like philosophy only gets you so far because we actually have physical evidence that we can use.
No, there's no physical evidence that you can apply to metaphysics. The only way to get to metaphysical truths are through philosophical inquiry and applying reason from and going from first principles and then adding it up, because consciousness is metaphysical. Consciousness has there's no like consciousness particle like there.
So to be alive, you have to have consciousness. Just throwing that out there since that hasn't been clarified yet.
I think so, yeah. That's what I consider to mean, like, the lights being on.
Okay.
Like, if there's a certain physical configuration of matter that distinguishes the living from the dead, then I mean, I'd want to hear it, but it's definitely going to be something that sounds like poetry, I would imagine. That's just my
I
intuition.
don't know. I think it's a little more like your grocery list
Dude, that's such
than
bullshit.
poetry.
Metaphysics is never like that.
Why? Why not? Why can't it be? Says who? Says you? Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, there's your
Because
first
in like
problem.
your grocery list is all just like, again, it's post hoc. It's not from
Yeah,
the
but that
bottom
doesn't make
up.
it not true.
Yes, it does. The post hoc reasoning
Huh.
is fallacious thinking,
It can be
because you're just
dangerous, but it
taking it's
doesn't.
circular reasoning basically. You're taking your conclusion and you presuppose it to be true, and then you impose those sorts of facts that are related to your presupposed conclusion, and like then impose that on reality and try to make things fit that way, as opposed to looking at reality first. What I want to know is what the factor is that distinguishes the living from the dead.
I don't think it's a factor. I think it's factors.
And those factors being what?
Like, let me think about this so I say it exactly how I want to say it.
Or like, I remember being in high school and hearing like these criteria for the living things, and like I lost my
Yeah,
shit.
freshman biology.
Yeah, I thought it was so smart. So,
Fuck freshman bio, though.
dude,
That
yeah,
class
there's like
sucked.
fucking like 14 of these shits.
Oh, there should only be five.
Yeah, right? I don't remember there being so
Yeah.
many.
Cellular organization and the ability to reproduce, like the ability to grow and develop, like to find to balance. Oh, this is the one I always thought was good. To like be able to have like a homeostasis, to find a homeostasis within the body. Like there's a maximum, like there's a point of like healthiness, so to speak, that you want to maintain to like keep yourself alive. I guess response to environment or stimuli, like ability to adapt, which is the same thing as response to stimuli. Basically, it yeah. Respond to their environment, ability to adapt is the same thing. So that's the organization and ability to reproduce, the growth and development, uh, having a homeostasis, use of energy, and then five would be the response to your environment, like in stimuli, and then six, I guess, like which I like more than all of these really is like when you start to have awareness or like a ability to retain an experience, memory, genetic memory, something that you can retain whatever's happening to you. Like those would be like my six factors.
I don't think we're gonna come to a consensus here between the two of us. I think
And
I've
then maybe I
exhausted.
guess you could say adaptation, like adaptation, like adaptation through evolution. It's like a life thing. I'm not married to that one. I put that one on the end.
I don't know where to go from here without going in circles. Like I still
I think
don't. I feel
from
like
here, I think this is like that is the fundamental difference. Like I actually think these six factors are a reasonable place to draw the line, and you're just like, no, it's not.
like those things draw a line
I'm
between
saying that line
something
is
and
the
another
life.
thing. Like there's
It's
a
the life
line
line.
there. I'm not blind. Like obviously there's a difference between chemistry and what we call biology. Just like how there's a difference between chemistry and particle physics. Um,
Yeah.
and just like how there's a difference between particle physics and subatomic physics and what have you.
Earth
There's a
science.
line there between chemistry and what we call biology. But I don't think that that's the line between the living and the dead.
What's it the line for? Just like out of curiosity, if you could not have an answer,
It's
you know,
just
not
between one level and another. Like we can call it biology, but it's just from one level of complexity or the way things stack up to another.
okay. Yeah, I don't think we're gonna agree on that.
Yeah, no, I don't see a way out. I think I've stated all my arguments here. All right.
It was a good little conversation about life.
Yeah. I'm putting a couple videos in the chat that I have created that I think kind of articulate my arguments if anything was missed in this conversation.
The black dude at
Yeah.
the end.
I just tried to
Yeah, I
find the
was
most
like,
generic looking human. In hindsight, I should have used a picture of myself or something. Everyone has
yeah,
something to say about the random black dude at the end.
because there's the breath. You don't put any people, and then there's just some random black dude in the middle of like
I know, I
Philadelphia.
know.
Like,
I was like, this dude looks like a human. That's all I was
it's
looking
funny.
for. Or an image of
You ever
Christ. Oh,
been?
that would have been perfect.
Have you ever done the? Oh yeah, especially when if he's like this, like in that Vitruvian man pose.
Yeah. Shoot.